Good morning, folks. How are we doing? Thank you. Okay, appreciate it. Now, my phone going. Good question. Oh, there we go. Okay. Ooh. Okay, can you hear me at home? Yep, good. Cool. Okay, so that's taken care of. Oh, not 15. Let me get my book. And tablet. Okay, so the plan today is to focus primarily on copying information from one part of a sound to another. Oh, I guess it helps if I join that. Move the screen. We're experimenting with sound. Okay. That should be better. Sorry about that. So plan today is to talk about copying parts of sounds from one place to another. I know at least one group had trouble with this on Friday, and they wanted to insert some spaces in a controlled way between some sounds, and they had trouble doing that. And in the end, they sort of hacked around it in a pretty creative way. But we want to actually be able to do it in a more controlled way. And I think there's definitely some questions about that. Are there other questions first, however, before we start talking about that? Any questions for people at home? And just to confirm, like the folks at home can hear me, right? Oh, good, thank you. Okay. So, let me start by actually drawing a little bit on the whiteboard, and then we'll actually write some desk code. So let's imagine that we have, and let's get some colors in here because that'll help, I think, later on. Let's imagine that we've got a sound, and we have another sound. Oh, come on. Okay. And we want to copy those onto a new sound where, let's stretch that out a little more, where one is followed later on by the other. Okay, does that make sense? That like if this is the word the and this is the word frog, we want to put them together so it says the frog with a little bit of space in between because we don't, just immediately run from one word into the next. Okay. Now, there was a group, and there may have been other groups. I don't know because it's hard to know what I don't know what people tried as they were playing around on Friday. But at least one group I know attempted to do something like this using blend and found that it didn't work. And that's actually because blend takes two sounds and basically adds them together. So blend's going to give you this plus this in the same part of the sound file. They're both going to be lined up at the beginning of the sound file that you end up building. And that's not going to do the thing that you wanted it to do if your goal was to have them spaced out. And in this case, like my blue sound has much higher peaks and lower valleys than my green sound, which means it's going to be louder. And so if I actually blend them, if I overlay, sort of add them together, average them together, I'll probably get a lot more of the blue sound than the green sound. So I won't even get a super even blend. It would be like a really loud trumpet next to a really quiet, I don't know, violin or something. And so I probably am going to get something that's a lot more blue than green in this example. Okay. Questions about the setup so far? Good at home? Okay, so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to shift the blue sound over a certain amount. And this is very similar to the offset that we were doing in Pictureland. But here it's an offset on this x-axis in Soundland. So we're going to have to say, have a starting point. So blue start. Right? And we're going to have to move every sample from this blue sound over by that amount. So we're going to have to shift everything forward. And this is, in practice, almost identical to the shifting around that we did with pictures. In fact, it's a little simpler because with pictures, we had to shift in both the x-axis and the y-axis. We had to keep two dimensions straight as to where something ended up. In sound, we only have one dimension to worry about. So we just need to make sure we move it in that dimension the right amount. We do have the same problem that we had with pictures, which is if we don't make the target sound big enough, let's say the target sound goes to just to here. Then we're going to have an error when we get to there. If we're trying to copy the blue samples in, we get to here, it's going to go boom because we didn't have enough room. And this again is the same thing with the pictures, where if you tried to take a piece of a picture and put it somewhere in a canvas where it went off the right edge or off the bottom edge, you got one of these errors. And most of you had that happen at least once. Exactly the same thing can happen here with sound. If the target sort of canvas sound, if you want to think about a sound as having a canvas, if the canvas sound isn't long enough, when you copy the ends of the source in, they'll go off the end and you'll get that error. So you got to be careful that the canvas sound, the thing you're copying onto, is big enough to hold everything you're trying to copy onto it. Okay? Does that make sense? Questions about that? Okay, so let's actually do an example. I think would be a good plan. So are there any questions before we leave the whiteboard and go to Jess? Going, gone. So now I want to share my Jess screen. Okay, so got my Jess screen. And let's imagine that I want to, let's just pick two words that Mark Guzval says, and we'll put them next to each other with a little space in between them. So let's get airplane is make sound, get media file, airplane.wave, and along is make sound, get media file, along.wave, and I'm gonna need to call set media path to tell it where to find things. And I want that, and I want to say open, load my program. Oh yes, I need to save it. So CSci 1201 2020 10 12.py. Okay, now we'll load the program. Oh, didn't like that. Oh, get media path, duh. There we go. And notice it turned purple for me. Tell me that now it's actually right. If I'd been paying attention to the coloring, I might have noticed. And so I should be able to play. Oh, yeah, there's this problem. Okay, I'm going to try something here. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to share advance, that. And then I'm going to share just. So I don't know if that's going to help. Oh, that totally did not make a sound. Which tells me I need to turn this up. Whoa, and that's going to happen. That means I'm going to actually have to mute the phone. So I think the phone may have to leave the meeting for this to work in Soundland. That's bad. Well, let's have the phone leave the meeting. So, okay, so can folks at home hear me? Yes, okay, awesome. And we're not getting horrible feedback, issues, and echo.
Airplane.
And it played airplane. Did you hear airplane at home?
Airplane.
Did that work? Did airplane play at home for folks? Okay, cool. There's along.
Along.
Cool. And I don't know, can you people hear airplane and along well enough? Okay, sorry about that. Audio here is a little awkward. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, I think that if I use these speakers, we're going to get the echo problem again. And that's going to be bad. Okay, well, we'll just go this way. Okay, so I've got airplane and along. Now I want to put them together. So, def join words, P and Q. So the idea here is that join words will take two sounds, presumably words, but they don't have to be, and join them with P first and Q second and a half-second delay between. That's my plan. Does that make sense? So we're going to have P, whatever P is, a half second of silence, and Q after that. Okay? Good? So I need to say, first thing I need to do is I need to actually construct the canvas that all of this is going to go on. I've got to create a new sound that will have an appropriate size to hold the three things. And remember, there are three things here. There's P, there's the half second of silence, and then there's Q, right? So I've got to have enough room to hold those three things. Does that make sense? And so we can say P length is get length P, and that's going to be sort of the number of samples in P. Okay, so if we say get length of airplane down here, it's 14,503 samples. If we say get length of along, it's 13,727 samples. So along is a little shorter than airplane, okay? And I'm going to need to get the length of Q, okay? And now I also need, I guess to be consistent, number of samples in Q. I also need the length of half a second of silence, okay? And there's a number of ways I could do this. One issue is if the sampling rate of P and Q are different, then all kinds of weird stuff needs to happen because we're going to have to actually rationalize them when we join them together. So I'm actually going to assume that they have the same sampling rate. Because if they don't, my life just becomes a ton harder, and I don't want to think about it right now, because that would be a distraction. So I'm going to assume that P and Q have the same sampling rate. And so I'm going to actually find out what that is. Get let's see, what is it called? Just functions, sound, get sampling rate, okay. Get sampling rate, okay. So since I'm assuming that P and Q have the same sampling rate, then I only have to get the sampling rate from one of them, and I can assume it's the same for the other. And the sampling rate is samples per second. So if the pause is half a second, say pause length. Well, yeah, we'll just say pause. Then the pause length in samples is half the sampling rate. Because the sampling rate is how many samples per second. Let's see what that is actually. Get sampling rate airplane. 22,050, okay? So there'll be 22,000 samples in a full second of sound. I want a half second of sound, so I'm gonna want half of that, so about 11,000, okay? And so this gives me the number of samples in half a second. Okay. Make this a little wider. So that's how many samples there'll be in half a second. Does that make sense? So we're basically doing some algebra. Like these are kind of like word problems from algebra 2 or something, or even algebra 1. which was a long time ago, and you may have repressed most of that, but it is actually useful. And this is a place where it's actually very useful. Okay, so we now know the length of P, the length of Q, and the length of the pause. So we now know the total length, or we can compute the total length, which is P length plus pause length plus Q length. That's going to be the total length of our resulting sound. Does that make sense? So now we can make it. So we can say, we'll call it canvas, and it's make empty sound. And let me make sure it takes the number of samples and the sampling rate as an option. We don't care about the sampling rate, we'll just take the number of samples. So we're going to give it the number of samples, and that makes our, if I spell it correctly, that makes our canvas. That's where all our sound is going to go. Okay? Now, once all that setup is done, and you know, there's a lot of that, right? We spent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines just sort of prepping the studio, as it were. Like we've loaded the tape in the machine, and we got the right length of tape, and you know, we've set everything up, but we haven't actually done any of the work in some sense. But it needs to happen, right? There's not a good way to avoid any of this. We could move all of this into another function if we wanted to, give it a name like setup or create canvas or something like that. And then all of this would just do all this work in a helper function and return the new canvas. That actually wouldn't be a terrible plan. Might come back and do that when we're done here. But I'm going to sort of press on for the moment and start the copying. Okay. So actually, as a hint, maybe we'll say set up canvas up there, and then here we'll copy P onto canvas, and then there'll be another section where we copy Q onto canvas, and that'll suggest maybe some other helper functions as well when we get there. Okay, so let's copy P onto the canvas. Now, we could either use the get samples, or we can use the indexing. And I think for the moment, let's go ahead and do the indexing because we already know the length of P. So we can say for index in range P length, boom, up. And so that'll give us from 0 to, if it was airplane, it was 14,503. So this will go from 0 to 14,502. And so for every sample, for every index value, we want to get the appropriate sample from P and copy that into the canvas. So value, get value, sample value. That, okay. Just functions, sound, get sample value at. That's what I wanted. Get sample value at. And that takes a sound and an index. So I want sound P and index. And then I want to set sample value at, and that takes a sound and an index and a value. So I want to copy it onto the canvas in the same location with that value. And so that's going to copy all the values from P over into canvas. Okay. Now we'll do the question. I'm moving pretty fast, so definitely holler if you got questions. People here in the room are nodding, so I'm kind of going with that. But if people at home are like, whoa, slow down, man, that would be totally fine. Happy to answer questions. Any questions at home, or are we good? Seeing some thumbs up. Okay, we're going to call it good and move on. Thank you for the thumbs up, peeps. Okay, so now we got to copy Q. Oops. Got a thing down here for copy Q. Yep. Now this is going to look the same, except when we set the sample value, this is where we've got to do that offset thing. Because we can't just use index, because index will go from 0 to whatever, and that would put the second sound on top of the first sound, and that would be bad. So we're going to have to shift the second sound over, okay? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to compute the offset. How far over are we going to have to go? Well, how far over do we have to go? We have to cover the length of P. We got to go over all of that, and the length of our little pause, right? Because we want to start after the pause has ended. So our offset is going to P length plus pause length. I can't spell pause. Oh, gee, what did I do there? I left about in ways unexpected and inappropriate. Okay, so I'm going to want to take the length of P and the length of the pause and add them together, and I'm going to want to start there and go forward. Okay? And then the rest of it's the same for index, in range, Q length, value equals get, sample value at Q index, set sample value at canvas. Now here's where we have to use the offset. Okay. And these two sections are almost identical. They differ in using P versus Q and in the offset here. And if we just set offset to be 0 on this first one and did index plus 0, we can even have the offset up in the top one. It would just be, it's a different offset, an offset of 0, because we want to start up against the left-hand side instead of starting in however long we need to get everything to fit. Okay? Okie dokie, that was a lot of stuff, but that should work now. If we return the canvas, it should be in good shape. Are there questions before we try it out? Going. Load the program. We'll save the program. Load the program. And let's try, what did I call this thing? I called it join words. So result is join words airplane along. And I made a boo-boo. Aha. So this is slightly subtle, and they really don't give you much useful information. The important part is right here. It says the first argument can't be coerced into an int. The first argument is total length. Why would total length not be an integer? Anybody? Joseph? Yeah, so right here, when we computed the pause length, that could have been a fraction. In fact, sampling rate returns, if you remember, it returned 0.0. So that was actually a floating point number as well. So P length and Q length will be integers, but pause length is going to be a floating point number. So we have to convert it to an int so everybody will behave. The program, does that make sense to folks? Questions about that? Oh, it worked better that time. Lay result.
Airplane along.
Did it? Pause was maybe a little longer than it could have been, but
airplane, along,
a half second is actually a pretty long pause in human speech. We probably could shift that to a quarter second or even slightly less. But that illustrated the point. And if we do explore result, you can definitely see, oh, yeah, okay. You can see,
airplane, along,
you know, airplane, the space, and then along. Okay? In fact, the space is about the same length as both words, which suggests it's probably a little on the long side. Okay? Questions?
along, airplane,
So we can call it with other things. Like it's a fairly general function. If we, I don't remember what all is in the collection of sounds. Let's scoot over. Oh, east. Oh, dog. I like dog. Dog. Oh, that did not like that. Oh, was dog? Oh, dog's a JPEG. I can't turn a JPEG into a sound. Bad plan. Doesn't work. Okay, we'll do done. That's a WAV file, so that should work. Yeah. And so oh, I didn't call it done, I called it S. So done equals S. So I have my useful name.
airplane, done,
Something you'd rather not hear the pilot say. And notice that I can join these things together. So I could say join words. You know, even though I called them words, they don't have to be words.
airplane, done, airplane, along,
Right? So I can start to construct sentences by joining pairs of things together and then joining, you know, larger groups of things together. And, you know, you can start to do looping. So I could even call, well, let's do that, do this, and then the beginning of the next great dance track, right? Just needs a little more work and we'll be there. A little more work and we'll be there. So we can use this to join. So this is sort of similar to blend, but where blend kind of stacked things vertically, join words, which really probably ought to be called join sounds, thinking about it some more, kind of connects things horizontally, stacks things horizontally, and blend with stacking things vertically, right? Does that make sense as an analogy, right? And as I said, I think let's actually, let's lose the presumably words and just say two sounds. We'll call this joint sounds because I think that's a better name. And let's change this to, actually, let's just change it to 1/10 of a second. Oh, So I think we would get, oh, and I used 0.5 here when I should have used pause. figured that out. And now we should be able to do, let's see, what was R3? If we go back to,
Airplane.
oops,
Done.
I'm supposed to make it again, not play it. There we go. Now play R3.
Airplane.
Zeke gets prize. It is join sounds now, not join words. And notice that reloading didn't make the old function go away. It just created the new function. And so, yeah, it totally just did the old thing.
Airplane. Done.
So that's a slightly better cadence. And then I could,
Airplane.
so, Coolio. Okay, questions about that? We've done a lot there. So this would be a great time to pause and be like, help, I'm unclear on something.
I have a question.
Yes.
So like for the pause,
Yes.
So does this function like really like give a stop for like 1/10 seconds? Because if we change the function, the sampling rating function to the get sampling rating Q, change the P to Q.
Right.
So
if we change
like
this to Q
the
right
Q,
here.
yeah. So because the Q has like less simple.
Right. So the sampling rate is how frequently there are samples, how many samples per second. And it's not a function of how long the sound is, it's how often the samples happen in the sound. So you could have a sound that's an hour long and it might have the same sampling rate as a sound that's half a second long. Now, Q could have a different sampling rate though. And that's why I've assumed here that P and Q have the same sampling rate. So if you call join sounds with two sounds that have different sampling rates, I don't promise that join sounds will do the right thing. In particular, the length of the pause may not work right. And actually, one of the sounds might get sped up or slowed down depending on the relationship between the sampling rates. So this only works if P and Q have the same sampling rate. Did that answer the right question? Am I helping? Okay, cool. Other questions? Good question. Other questions? So I think, if I remember correctly, it was Dongting and Yubo that had been having the trouble getting the sounds to sort of come one after the other. Did this help? You feel like if you went back to Friday, you'd be able to fix that problem that you're having? Cool. Awesome. Okay, so I think we should do some what's called in computer science refactoring. So refactoring is taking a working program and modifying it so it's still a working program, but that it's easier to read, easier to maintain, sort of a better, cleaner, shinier program. And so we talked earlier as we went through that all of this was just about making the canvas, and there's big similarities between these two copy sections. And so I think we can improve this by pulling out some new functions that do these pieces for us and make our joined sounds easier to read, okay? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to start by pulling out setup canvas. So I'm going to cut, and I'm going to make a new function def setup canvas that takes P, Q, and delay. And so we should say what this does. So this creates an empty sound canvas whose length is the sum of the length of P, the length of Q, and enough samples for a blank space of length delay using the sampling rate of P and Q, which are assumed to have the same sampling rate. So we're going to take the length of P, length of Q, we're going to get the sampling rate. Now I called it pause here, we'll call it delay to match what I did. And now, oh, actually we don't set it anymore, it's an argument coming in, so we don't do that. Oh, sorry. I hit an arrow key and leapt into the far future of the world. So this is going to go away because that's now an argument that we're being handed. And so the delay length, probably to use a better name. And I don't know why I switched from delay to pause, to be honest with you. And I'm going to move this comment. This line is getting long. Come on. Paste. The number of samples in the delay. The total length is all of that. And I guess I called it delay length. And create empty sound, make empty sound, and return. Oh, we do have to return the canvas now. So by pulling it out into its own function, I've got to make sure I return it so I can get it in the function that's calling it. So that's just, quote unquote, copying that code up somewhere else and giving it a name. Obviously, I did have to make some changes. Some of them were changes of my own. I created trouble for myself by changing the name from pause to delay, and that created work. The main things that would have had to have happened is I've now made delay or pause an argument so I don't set it to something, and I've got to make sure I return the canvas. Everything else was just me making work for myself by changing that argument name. So actually questions about setup canvas before we go back and use it and check that it still works? So then here we have canvas equals setup. Let's say capital U, yeah, I did. Setup canvas PQ 0.1. Did I put the delay last? Yes, sir. Oh yeah, right here. Oh, this is interesting because pause length was computed in the code that we moved. And so that computation is not here anymore. And so we're going to have to redo it in this function. And that's kind of annoying. Let's see, what do I want to do about that? So the issue here is that this is the number of samples in the delay or the pause, however we want to think about it. And we don't even have a delay here. We probably need to add one. And if the delay is in seconds, not samples, you've got to get from seconds to samples. That was done up here, right here. And that used sampling rate here. Okay, so we have this complication of getting the delay length, and this is computed here, but we lose it, right? It's a local variable to this function, so we needed it here, but then it's gone when this function finishes. We can't refer to it in the other function, and we can't return it because we're already returning something. It's not quite true. We could return a pair that's the canvas and the delay length. Do I want to do that? Maybe that's the thing to do. So this is getting a little on the fancy side, but it would avoid doing this twice. So we could return a little pair that is just those two items. And now down here, sorry, the wrong button again. Canvas, I'll change this name to setup result. And then canvas will be setup result 0, and delay length will be setup result 1. So we put them in a pair, a little list here, where canvas is in position 0 and delay length was in position 1. And so when we get the result down here, this is going to be that little list. And so we're going to say we need to get the 0 thing and call it canvas, and we need to get the 1 thing and call it delay length. It's a lot going on. Feel free to throw up your hands and shout. And then to answer Zeke's question from before, this needs to be delay length because that's the name I used up here. If I had called this pause length, I could have called this pause length and that would have been fine. But since I changed the name up above, I would need to change it here as well. So now in theory, this ought to work. So if we say R7 is join sounds done airplane, oh, we now supply a delay, and something didn't work. Oh, P length is not defined because P length was done up in setup. So I'm still going to have to like redo P length and Q length here. How annoying. Well, life's a challenge. So let's go ahead and do that. P length, I'm going to put that in a separate section here. Get length, P, Q length, get length. In fact, for reasons which will become clearer in a second, I'm going to move this down here. and move this under that comment. And that will actually make some sense in a little bit. Reload. Oh, it worked. Play R7.
Done. Airplane.
Aha. We were able to join those up using our new simplified join sounds that call setup result to do all that setup work. Okay, that was a lot. Questions about that before we do some more of that? Because I want to do something with the two copy sections. But any questions about setup result? And we didn't have to do this bracket thing. I could have just recomputed delay length down here the same way I computed it up above, but I didn't want to redo it because redoing it sucks. It's like, oh, who wants to redo work? So I was like, well, I have it. I might as well pass it back. So if I pass it back here, then I've got it and I can extract those two pieces down here. I wouldn't expect you to need to do anything like that in any of your projects, but you know it's possible if it comes up. Okay, so questions at home?
In line 1 of join sounds, could you swap out 0.1 for delay?
Oh, I should swap out 0.1 for delay. It's not can I? I absolutely ought to. I'm going to pass delay in. I better use it because without that, I could say put like a second here and it still would have just put 0.1 seconds. So that's a huge mistake. Thank you. Good job. So now if I do, let's say 0.75, something kind of long so we'll know the difference.
Done. Airplane.
Yeah. And if we, I don't know, let's like really go crazy.
Done. Airplane.
And then go back to really fast. That's as good as 0. See what that's like.
Done. Airplane.
Actually, there's enough space in the sound samples themselves. You don't really need to put any space in. It's still entirely legible without any space at all. So good catch. Thank you. Other questions or other mistakes that Nick has made that need to be fixed? Okay. Then let us do something about the copy sections. So the two copy sections are pretty much the same. Let me pull this down a little bit. Pull this out a little bit. Pull this down a little bit. Oh, a little more exciting than I had in mind. So we're going to get the length of the sample. We're going to have an offset. So why don't we pass that in as an argument? Because that's going to be different. Here it'll be 0. Here it'll be this thing. Okay. And then we're going to do this little loop. And so I think if we take P, because P is going to change, take canvas, because we need to modify canvas, and take the offset so that we know what to add down here. I think we can make a little function out of this. So I'm going to actually grab this one because it has the offset in it. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to make a new function. Def copy onto, oh no, I'll just say copy. So we have sound, and we have canvas, and we have offset. I'll put offset here. And I want to paste that other code in. Now, my names are all going to be wrong, so this is going to be sound, this is going to be sound length, I don't compute offset anymore because I'm given it. So that needs to go away. For index and range, this has got to be sound length. L value, get, this needs to become sound. Set sample at canvas, index plus offset stays the same and value stays the same. So I think that may do what I need. Okay, questions? And then if that works, then I can actually replace this with copy P offset 0 onto canvas. All of that will disappear. And then copy Q onto, oh, I deleted the offset thing. That was weird. I thought I kept that. Well, apparently not. So we're going to have to, we'll do offset and canvas, and the offset was P length plus pause or delay length. We don't need that anymore. Oh, I see what I deleted. I deleted Q's loop when I thought I was deleting P's loop. Okay. So now this whole thing almost completely fits in my screen. And if I remove actually some of the blank lines, I think they're probably less necessary now, it all fits. So we set up the result and extract the pieces. We copy P, we copy Q, and we return the canvas. So let's see if that works. RA is join. I don't think we've done a long airplane. Do a 0 again. Oh, made a boo-boo. Oh, and that really should be, oh, I deleted P length. Ah, yes. So P length needs to be here. Get length P, just the sound, right? So I had P length for the index, and then I deleted that because the loop went away. And so, in fact, we could probably just say get length P here, and get rid of that. Meh, 6 of one, half a dozen the other.
Come on, airplane.
And it did it. So all this refactoring business hasn't really been necessary for solving the problem, right? But it's part of what one does in the business of building good software, right? That trying to clean up things like this is an important part of trying to make good quality software as opposed to just making software that works. Okay? So, which I think is important. Questions? Other mistakes that people see? I know people have been playing along at home here. Did it work? Does it appear to do the thing? Okay. Anybody at home having problems getting theirs to work? Good? Okay, awesome. Nick, have a question? then I think that wraps up that example. That was what I was going to cover. I'll say that the book does chunks of this in chapter 8. And they do a little more than we did here. And if there'd been time, I would have actually run through all this, but I don't think there's really time to do it well. But they have a copy function that is basically the same as our copy function. Some of the argument names are different, but it's pretty much the same idea. They also have a clip function that takes a section out of a sound. So our copy puts a sound onto a canvas. Clip takes a section of a larger sound and extracts a smaller sound from it. And then they use that to rearrange the words in something that somebody says. So they take the preamble sample and they identify where particular words are in that sample, and then they cut 4 words out and join them together in a different order. So it sounds kind of like he is saying something he didn't actually say. They don't have him saying something like rude or unpleasant because they're the authors of the book and they wouldn't want to do that to themselves. But it illustrates the ability to manipulate this kind of material, right? And we haven't talked about this very much, but I'd like to. I'll share some readings at some point in the not too distant future, because these things can be used, for cool effects, but they can also be used for ill, right? You can modify images to remove people, for example, or to add people to a picture where the person really wasn't there. You can modify sounds so that people say things they never said, or if you remove a knot in a carefully chosen location, you can make the meaning of somebody's statement sound wildly different, right? And modern computer tools have actually made it much easier than one might wish to do this kind of thing and make it sound very realistic. I mean, in some sense, the ability's always been there, and it was there before computers. I mean, in Stalinist Russia, manipulation of photographs in the dark room, and this is all analog pre-computer stuff, was a very common thing. Manipulating tape of sound is an old idea, both in propaganda, but also just in music. But computers have made sophisticated things a lot simpler, and have made it a lot easier for a lot of this stuff to seem pretty realistic. Whereas, especially when you got into video, making realistic video of people saying things they didn't say was actually pretty hard. And now there's a whole area called deep fakes, where people have developed tools that make it increasingly plausible to have people say arbitrary things. So you can have, political leaders saying kind of crazy things that they almost certainly didn't say, or, actors say things that they didn't say. It helps if you have a large body of recorded speech from that person. So the people at great risk here are not us, because there's probably not hours and hours of audio of you speaking. There probably is a lot of hours of me speaking thanks to COVID, but we'll hope that students aren't archiving that to create deep fakes of me saying weird things. But public figures, so, people in the entertainment industry, TV, movie, singing, and politicians and other sort of public figures are at particular risk of being having their audio manipulated or their video manipulated in this kind of way. So it's a thing to be aware of. Every tool has its cool stuff and it's like scary stuff, and this is no different. So, okay, are there questions? We have 2 minutes left. The people in this room are putting their gear away, which is telling me that they're ready to go home. Everybody else is still in bed, sort of watching on their phone, so they're already home. So, any questions? Except for, of course, the people in China where it's like after 11 p.m. So they're probably not still in bed. Questions going? Okay, I will see everybody Wednesday and we'll do more of the same. Talk to you later. Ciao.